So today I think it is also Japanese, but it's an actual film this time, not a series. That is, series which is uh, mostly longer films, I suppose. Usually, just you know, um, but yeah, this time it's just a slightly bit different with regards to genre. It's still in its around the same ballpark. It's called Stranger. It's from 2016, and it's likely about vampires, which is a sort of similar sort of theme in terms of horror, although it's more personal, I suppose. I mean, most horror films are personal anyway. They deal with interpersonal issues. Well, but vampires, though, it's obviously more fictional than usual. Well, mo- 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 most horror films have a fictional element anyway. It's not like, a cello doesn't magically do things, does it? And uh, actually, Dying Guy was quite realistic in comparison, wasn't it? Comparison to many ghost stories and such, like Dead Friend, and even Jacob's Ladder was more fictional in a way than Dying Guy. And Jacob's Ladder was kind of still like that. Was in a way humanistic. It also included, I mean, demons and such, but they were obviously merely symbolic for his hallucinations, maybe rare hallucinations. So, uh, yeah, still, so in a way, they were similar, no? Yeah, so vampires slightly different. So, yeah, and yeah, uh, whereas the previous two TV channels are a little bit nice. As mentioned, this one I really don't know. It says "Hey Walls." I've just seen it before, and then there's an X and minus. No, that's just Japanese, I think. But yeah, I have never heard of Halo. At any rate, yeah, and there's also Toro. Shiki had a Toro. So I guess it's Toro, sort of a name that they use in vampire stories, I guess. And it begins really quickly with regards to how topical it gets, but then it jumps into the credits, and it really makes no sense when credits are like this. Like, what's the point of showing? It's one thing for credits to just show, like old movies, they used to just scroll credits through. It's boring mostly. But this shows bits of it. Presumably, it's bits of it, unless it's cut bits. I mean, what's the point? It's one thing to do that after it's finished, sort of like a recap. But what was the point of this? I mean, you either run the risk of having spoilers, or I mean, it makes no sense. Either way, just seeing random people you've never seen before makes no difference, really. So it's a weird decision to do this. The music sounds very familiar. I'm not sure exactly specifically which it is, or what name it is or anything, but it seems very familiar. Like, honestly, like almost every piece of music seems familiar. So I wonder whether they compose anything original at all. Because I'm pretty sure, I mean, most of it is, yeah, most of it seems to be classical music, so I'm assuming it's in the public domain, but it seems familiar at any rate. Not the most obvious though classical music, so I don't exactly which it is, but it seems familiar to me. I don't know why it keeps cutting to these intermission type of things where various clips are shown. Makes little sense. It acts like a series when it's supposed to be a movie. I'm not sure if it makes me think it's adapted from something else. Uh, we'll see later, I guess. I just hope that I don't end up watching a movie before I watch a series or something. Sleep movies are usually the culmination of a series and such. By the way, it's kind of curious how some police people are speculating on how uh, someone's existence won't ever be forgotten. Uh, I don't think police did that. That's more the area of maybe the psychologists or such. Really. So I'm wondering whether the coroner is also a vampire because he said modern people, and just before that, uh, in a scene, the other formerly identified as vampires were talking about time and such and short lifespan. So why would the coroners specifically comment about modern people if it's not within such a context? By the way, that scene with those couple of vampires just after one bites the doctor, they the scene was playing with some obviously unoriginal music. They obviously got it from somewhere else. I've heard it loads of times before, but the music is still pretty epic. So it really makes a scene seem greater than it is. Really, I'm not entirely sure it is classical music, so I don't know about any copyright status. But anyway, yeah, it was pretty interesting. I've always liked that music at any rate, so yeah, it sort of yeah, comes in. And then there's an investigation, which is also interesting, I suppose. But by the way, isn't it convenient how there's somehow sometimes a mirror just tucked in, just there within eye line, and it just so happens that there's a vampire in front of it. Very convenient. Very. By the way, so far I've watched series, well, two different types of things with a character called Akka in them, and I didn't know Akka could be a unisex name apparently. So in Naruto there was an Akka which was female, and in this one it's a male. And I'm assuming the one in the more famous movie anime is male, I assume, and ironically I haven't watched that yet, but I've already watched a couple others. There's an Akira. I'm assuming less famous others. But by the way, I've watched some of the vampire tales in the past, but I've never seen any vampire anywhere eat or suck somehow the vitality of roses. They've mentioned roses before, but I didn't think it would be this bizarre. And I never heard of vampires doing that to roses. Strange. This even has a proper recap at nearly the hour mark. It makes me wonder whether it's some sort of condensed version of the series. I hope not. Hopefully, I'm not missing bits that someone happened to think would be fine cut. I don't know why they felt like they need to blatantly repeat scenes that have just been shown. Like literally, I've just seen it a second prior, and I I need to see it again. I mean, even if it's like 30 seconds long, but what's the point? It's kind of funny also that they use that theme music, uh, unoriginal theme music that is when they're doing the police investigation. It's not quite very appropriate. I mean, it sounds like they need to summon. They're about to summon some sort of outer space demon or something. I just it's just the police talking among each other. Yeah, not the most appropriate of music, and it's not even. It must have been taken from somewhere else. I don't know. Is it Star Wars? I think, or well, it's very familiar. Just it's probably Hans Zimmer or such. Hmm. I like how they juxtapose the library investigations alongside with the more physical investigations that the vampires were doing. The music was appropriate there, at least interesting. Also, later on, soon after, they were talking in the old bookstore, and I'm not entirely sure why he got his reflection to appear. They were among other vampires, so I'm not entirely sure. Maybe a symbol of humanity, maybe it appears out of nowhere without even willing it, and it seems like he could will his reflection. He did it earlier, so he could also forget it, of course. But in this case, reflection came on even when it's not strictly needed. So I wonder if it also comes. It can if it can come possibly can come on randomly or and in such sort of I suppose resonant moments is mm, some obvious. By the way, why exactly they have candles underneath lamps? I mean, yeah, makes no sense. Like, they're both sources of light, and candles look nice, but they're a source of fire hazards, really. So, yeah, I'd stick with lamps, really. So, I suppose if we were to make comparisons, this police detective here would be equivalent to Ozaki from Shiki, but he was a doctor, not detective. So the doctor, which is similar to the profession that the now English teacher has had, that is. Uh, but of course, he's a vampire, not a the one who's seeking out vampires, unlike this. So it's a bit of a roundabout way. Of course, Ozaki was brutal as well. I was much more brutal on this detective who so far has just been investigating. He also smokes though, so that's one commonality. By the way, why did that guy have such a reaction and yet not know a person from the picture? It makes no sense. Like, was that reaction subconscious or something? It makes no sense. Otherwise, surely he should know why he had that reaction if he doesn't truly know him, or maybe he's simply hiding it. If so, he's hiding it badly considering he has such a reaction. So I like how they say it's a work of fiction, as if somehow vampirism, yeah, could be mistaken for reality. Anyway, yeah, I very much like the character of Misuga. He nothing phased him, absolutely nothing. I mean, at the end, he seemed to have drawn a tear, but really, other than that, he never became angry. He really fulfilled, I think, what the old guy said, that he should be still and tranquil. Yeah, quite interesting. Remind me of Itsuji, although they were more depressive rather than simply tranquil. Vampire stories can be quite interesting. Like, so far, I haven't seen any vampire story that wasn't interesting, at the very least interesting. Shiki is still my favorite, but this is pretty good for live action. I noticed it's done by Production IG, so hopefully it's not an adaptation. Yeah, it's all interesting. At the end, yeah, it played with expectations. Yeah, and interesting. and also ask some relevant questions that these type of stories usually ask. I mean, you cannot have questions about immortality, about time, in stories about zombies. Can one? Just zombies are so drab in comparison. It's just obviously they're a metaphor of the unthinking masses. So in a way, they are more realistic than anything. Vampires, on the other hand, are more, they pose more of a question of longer term, of like what if someone could live forever? Could they live forever? So they retain their youth, and obviously they could still be destroyed. I think that's the premise of most others, at least, but other tales. But yeah, they still so pose these potentially interesting questions, and this is what this is what this what's it called? There was a Madhouse production. Yeah, Kurozuka. Yeah, Kurozuka, I think, or maybe a letter or two switched over there. Anyway, yeah, they also asked what if since they're supposed to live for a very long time, so what if you could live up to 1,000 years? In this case, it was only 100 in this film. But yeah, so in Kozuka, thought they lived 1,000 years and saw so many changes from you know if 1,000 years. So they just skipped over the Edo era and such. But anyway, yeah, it's interesting and how different eras react to them as well. And this is kind of what happens here as well. Not quite as much as that, and this only was about 100 years. The way he thought that he played with them and expectations and how he deflected, yeah, it was interesting. Uh, what happened? Um, it's a bit annoying though that they didn't. They mentioned the death penalty at the end, and they didn't really go further about it. They could have, questioned the premise at all. It's just like, why would you say that should be the state if I mean, in this context, at least it seems like there were some mental health issues. The story reminded me of Psycho, which has a similar sort of thing, but without the vampire bits. But yeah, but it was interesting otherwise, though. The fact that that's whereas I think it very well subverted expectations. So most vampires in this one though would most yeah would bite in the carotid artery. This one they try to heal. I thought that by healing they were turning them into a vampire, but it wasn't made explicit, so that's not said. I thought that might be the case, but yeah, there wasn't evidence in the end. Uh, so they sort of changed it upside down, and like the detective was confused as well because of that, and as he must be, yeah, because that doesn't normally happen. And in the end, yeah, it seems like he still couldn't figure out who healed her in the first place. So although in the end she didn't really make much of a difference, except for for sort of no for a contrast, yeah, to the story. So I guess yeah, that did add a bit, but in the end, she had just woken up and such. It didn't really make as uh, a contribution to the narrative itself, except as so far as to highlight the difference between the two cases of the two females. I think that's pretty much it. Other than that, though, and yeah, the other story was more of a detective one, really, not so much this.